Dr. Seuss said it best. When you're in a slump, you're not in for much fun. Unslumping yourself is not easily done. But what if it's not you that you're trying to unslump? What if it's a member of your team? Getting a team out of a funk can be even more challenging than trying to unslump yourself. You've got to support and encourage that member of your team, but still hold them accountable to their goal. In this episode, I'm going to give you concrete ways that you can help your team when one of them is struggling that doesn't involve dialing for dollars or managing metrics. Welcome to Sales Fiction, a podcast that helps small sales teams get big results. I'm your host, Christy Lawrence, the founder of Mighty Sales and a longtime sales professional who traded my corporate sales career to help small but mighty teams do more with less. Each week on this podcast, we separate sales fact from sales fiction so that you can hyper-focus your effort on the skills, strategies, and tools that will have the biggest impact on your bottom line. Let's dive right in. We've all been there. We've had periods of time where we just cannot seem to get a win to save our lives. That even though our careers have been filled with a lot of successes, that maybe you've gone through a period of time where it feels like all you get is a no. And not only are you getting no's, but the rejection feels like it's mounting. And the more pressure that you put on yourself, the harder it is to motivate yourself to go out there, see your prospects, and win new deals. And the challenging thing with a slump is it's not just one day or 1 week of bad luck or challenging sales calls. It's something that happens where you're experiencing poor results over an extended period of time. And what really classifies something as a slump is that feeling of starting to lose hope. It's hard when you go through it on your own, but it's even more challenging when you're watching someone on your team experience this, especially when it's somebody that you know is talented, that has the ability to be incredibly successful, that you've seen be successful many times in the past, and you're watching them struggle day after day, week after week. And it can be really frustrating to figure out, how do I support this person? How do I get them achieving their goals again? And I still need to hold them accountable to that goal. And so I want to give you some tools and resources to be able to do just that. But first, I think it's really important to really understand what causes a slump, a true slump, right? This extended period of time. There's a lot of different things that can cause this for people in sales. And I want to go into some of the common reasons first, because until you identify the root cause of what's causing this slump, addressing it is going to be challenging. And depending on what's causing it, it's going to impact how you choose to address it for this team member. So here are some of the common reasons that cause a slump. One is just burnout. Burnout where someone's overworked, they maybe haven't taken vacation time, they've been showing up early every day, they've had a lot on their plate. Personally or professionally, they've been going, and they just burn out. A second cause of a slump is really this kind of self-criticism, perfectionism, fixed mindset triad. And if you're not sure what I'm saying when I say fixed mindset, go back and re-listen to that episode of the podcast where it talks a little bit about how to help develop a growth mindset in your team. But for a lot of team members, sales is just as much mental as it is skill-based. And it's hard because sales, you are going to have failure when you're in sales. You are not going to have 100% win ratio. People are going to tell you no. And people that struggle with self-criticism, perfectionism, and fixed mindsets can really struggle when these no's start to mount, getting into a negative self-talk loop where they're struggling mentally to see that this isn't about them, that the no's aren't always about them. They're really internalizing the no's and taking it personal, which can make it hard to be motivated and keep putting yourself out there. So that is a common reason that people often go into a slump, is they get into this self-criticism, perfectionism mindset. Another one is skill development. They're lacking a particular skill that will help them be successful, that there's something that they actually need to be doing differently that they're not doing that is contributing to their lack of success over time. Another one is sometimes we go through periods of bad luck. I use the example, you drive through a neighborhood and all of a sudden there's like 10 houses for sale in that neighborhood. And if you're looking for a house, you might start to wonder, wow, what's wrong in that neighborhood? What's going on? Why is everybody selling? But sometimes, truly, it is just a coincidence and people get new jobs or are downsizing or upsizing, and it all just happens at the same time. That happened to me when I sold my house. My neighbor across the street and the neighbor next to me put their house on this market within 2 days of when my house went on the market, for totally unrelated reasons. So sometimes a slump really is a result of bad luck that just happens over a period of time. So it feels like you're just not being successful when there really isn't a bigger root cause. It's just timing and coincidence. And then another cause of a slump is stress conflicts, where your team member maybe has a lot of things going on in their lives unrelated to work that are affecting their mental mindset at work. This links pretty closely to burnout, but it's really good to distinguish, is burnout coming from just an overall stress load or from a workload situation when you're trying to think about how you want to manage this in a team. So the very first thing I want to tell you when it comes to helping a team member get out of a slump is that it's important that you don't panic, that you don't go down the rabbit hole with them, that you can see that this is just going to be temporary, that you hold the belief that they will get through it and their luck will change, because that is going to help them do the same thing. Regardless of why your team member is struggling or what's causing the slump, the most important thing you need to remember as a leader is not to panic. They're already struggling. They already have self-doubt. If you start to panic about their performance, you're going to increase the pressure that they're putting on themselves and potentially magnify the challenges that they're facing. And so even though you might internally be really worried about, is this going to last forever? How do I get them out? If your actions show that you're panicking, you are going to actually do more harm than good when it comes to your ability to coach them out of the slump. So that is the most important thing to remember, is that if this is somebody who has a history of strong performance, and now they are just in a long extended period of time where they're struggling, that you have to maintain the belief that this is temporary and you can help them and go about your approach with that belief in mind. So let's go back to those common reasons. We've got, this kind of group of reasons around burnout, stress conflicts. We have a group of reasons around self-criticism, perfection, fixed mindset. So these are a lot of mindset related issues. And then we have a skill development potential problem where maybe they've come up against their ability to grow or to be successful with their current skill set. I want you to identify what is causing the slump, what was the root cause of the slump before going into action, because what caused it is going to shape how you address it. So let's first talk about burnout and stress conflicts. This is going to be very counterintuitive, but if your team member is struggling from a slump that started because of burnout and chronic stress, it's really important that they take a break, that they step back, take off the pressure, and give themselves an opportunity to recuperate from that stress load. It's counterintuitive because when somebody's struggling, we want to push them harder. We want them to be making more calls, seeing more customers, because we know that the more calls that they make, the higher likelihood it is that they're going to be able to be successful. But if burnout is the true cause of the slump or it is stress, this actually makes the problem worse. Sometimes just taking 2 or 3 days away from the office, off the phones, and recharging can make a world of difference. There's a great quote by Anne Lamott. She's a writer, but she says, everything works better, including yourself, sometimes just from unplugging it. this version, right? That sometimes when our computer's not working, we just unplug it and restart it. And that is true for ourselves as well. And so if burnout is the core reason that somebody is struggling over a long period of time, you are going to need to encourage them to actually work less. And again, I know this is going to be counterintuitive and hard. Maybe they don't have the vacation time, or they don't have the ability to truly unplug and take a step back and recharge. If that's the case, it's really important that you help them focus on low stress activities, things that they enjoy that help them recharge while they're taking that pressure off temporarily, so that they're reducing that stress load. When I was running a lot, training for marathons, they often say it's better to undertrain than overtrain. And again, it's this idea that over time, when we have chronic stress loads on our body, we will fatigue and it's really hard to recover. And so for these scenarios where burnout is really the root cause of the slump, encouraging that team member to take a break, or focusing on something unrelated to sales, something that they truly enjoy, something that helps them remember their why, can really be things that help them to break that slump. Now let's talk about, what if it is this mental mind loop where they're beating themselves up, they're self-critical. Now let's look at the second group of causes for burnout: self-criticism, perfectionism. Maybe they have a fixed mindset and they're continuing to beat themselves up. I'm not very good at my job. I'm not going to be successful. I'm really struggling, and they can't get out of this mental mind loop. I really messed up that pitch with that potential customer. I really am not doing great on my networking activities. I'm having a hard time starting conversations, but they're doing this in a way where it feels like they're beating themselves up. It's important for you to do a couple of things. One, celebrate the micro wins. Sometimes micro wins mean things like getting the name of the decision maker. Sometimes it means booking the next appointment, even if it's not closing the deal. Sometimes it means getting a yes or no answer, even if the answer is no, that you actually got that prospect to engage and give you an answer. So sometimes, in order to help people break this mindset and perfectionism, really focusing on small micro wins can be incredibly, incredibly important. The next thing that you can do is focus on the last hot track. What was happening when they were being successful? Be curious about them. Ask them about the last deal that they won. Ask them about the last 3 accounts that they had progress with. Get them thinking about and remembering about the times when they were being successful. That can help them be focused on where they're winning and break that mental mindset versus focusing on where they're struggling. And the more they focus on where they're struggling, the more they're going to struggle. And so your job as a leader is to help them stop hyper focusing on what's not working and instead hyper focus on things that are working, so that they can start believing in themselves again. Another thing that is really important here is to actually help them name and claim their frustrations. Ask them, hey, what do you think happened in that account? Okay, what's the worst case scenario based on that? What are you worried about? What is the stress level there? And to not coach them or tell them that they're wrong, but to give them a place to voice and acknowledge the stress that they're under and these mental mind loops that they're having. There's a lot of great research that say just by writing out and journaling about our anxieties and our fears and our worries, that we actually can reduce the amount of anxiety that we feel about something. Give them a space to actually talk about these things, name it and claim it, can help them actually get out of that rut of just self-criticism and beating themselves up. Another thing that you can do is have them spend time with your best customers. That's sometimes part of sales that we forget about a lot of times, and we're going to talk about this a little bit more next week, is the post-sales process. And so if you have some customers that love this particular team member, that love your company, that love your product or service, have them spend time in post-sales with those individuals so that they can get back into that positive mindset. I remember when I was in sales, if I was having a bad day and I was struggling and I was like, oh my gosh, these just nothing's going right. I had a couple of accounts that I would go visit just because I knew they would make me feel better. They were my default account on a bad day. And so this can be really helpful for your team members when they're in a slump as well. The next thing is if there's a skill development issue. Sometimes people are in a slump because they don't have the skills or because they actually need support in getting better, that they need skill development. If this is the case, it's really important to focus on the one thing that is going to help them be most successful and give them some training and support around that. We have some great resources in previous podcasts on how to hyper-focus your training to get the best results from your team. I encourage you to go back and listen to that if there is a skill development issue that's causing this slump. Here's the most important thing I want to say. It's so counterintuitive, but a lot of times when somebody is struggling on our team, we want to push them to work harder, to just keep going out there, to keep talking to people. And oftentimes, if there's a skill development issue, just by going out and talking to more people, if they're practicing doing something with poor technique, poor skills, it's not going to help them in the long term. So sometimes taking a step back and giving them the training and support and development around the areas that they can improve is going to have a much greater impact than just doing more. The same is true when you have somebody who's struggling with burnout and stress loads, that just doing more is actually going to make the problem more difficult. And so as much as it is counterintuitive that actually when somebody is in a slump, making sure that you're not going into micromanaging as a way to manage that slump is critically important. That if you can actually get to the root cause of what's causing the slump, and then provide the appropriate support, tools, and encouragement around that particular issue, they will break that slump much faster and end up having a greater deal of success long-term for you and your organization. So what I want you to really remember here is that everybody at some point in their career will go through a slump. Not all slumps are caused by the same thing. So first you have to identify what caused the slump so that you can create an action plan that actually addresses the root cause of that slump. Next week, I'm going to talk more about why post-sales is one of the most important parts of the sales process and how you can set your team up for success after the sale, after the deal's been signed, in a way that generates more revenue and more sales for your company and your organization. In the meantime, if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to give us a 5-star review and subscribe to Sales Fiction so you can get fresh episodes downloaded as soon as they are available.